Sorry for this unpredictable delay, but now everything functions, and that's good. We can start. So I'm very happy to say to you, and that's also this room upstairs, it's number 40, that is also full of interested people who want to follow, and they will do that by streaming. So we have another benefit of this hybrid conference, which the first one that we so far experienced. And so as the president of the program committee of the second International Conference Psychology and Music, Interdisciplinary Encounters, I wish you a warm welcome for those who are present in person and also online. And we have today our first opening in this great hall of the Faculty of Music, which is the main organizer of the conference, together with the Institute of Psychology, Serbian Psychological Association, and Regional Network Psychology in Music. So we are very proud to start our conference with the keynote of Professor David Dolan, who is a professor of classical improvisation and its application to solo and chamber music performance at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London, where he is the head of the Center for Creative Performance and Classical Improvisation. All truth.
So wondrous.
It's about David. He also teaches at the Yehudi Menuhin School and is an associate of Clare Hall University of Cambridge. He has been conducting master classes and workshops worldwide, including Paris, Geneva, Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Moscow, Helsinki, Boston, Vienna, Juilliard, and now also Belgrade is on your map. That's good. As a concert pianist, researcher, and teacher, David Dolan has devoted a significant part of his career to the revival of the art of classical improvisation and its application in performance. In his performances around the world, he returns to the tradition of incorporating improvisation within the classical repertoire. In short, Professor Dolan is one of the rare experts in the field of improvisation in classical music, and we are privileged to have him here. His method and theoretical and research background are closely related to psychology, integrating its knowledge into music performance processes. His research, in collaboration with the Imperial College Neuroscience team and psychologist John Sloboda, that we all know from the last conference, focuses on creativity and expression in performance, and is already published, so you can follow that on and find on the internet. Therefore, Professor Dolan is an ideal guest for us for this conference that fosters interdisciplinary encounters in music and psychology. Professor Dolan invited string quartet of the Faculty of Music to assist him in presenting his ideas and methods. The members of are our students, Stasha Žikić, Nikola Bok, Nemanja Damović, and Vuk Ovaskain from the class of Nemanja Stanković. So please greet Professor Dolan and string quartet, who will come a bit later. And at the end of the lecture will be a moment to post questions, also during the lecture, but Professor Dolan will say, well, we'll lead the session now. I stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a common practice to say when you go to a new city that you enjoy yourself, but this is actually very, very true. I've been here from Sunday night, and we worked with the quartet that Blanca mentioned, and it has been a joy, not an obvious one, and you will see why in a minute. Just a word about the 90 minutes that we are going to spend together. Let's have the clock ticking so that, voila. I will say a few words of general background, and then we'll invite the quartet to share with you a little bit. It will be like a tiny degustation, you take a tiny bit of taste of this and that, because the presentation will be about a concert experiment that took place in Imperial College in one of their amazing. It looks like a Star Wars ship, really, with hundreds of sensors and computers. It was a concert experiment, and the musicians are there with what Blanca called swimming cap, which is equipped with electrodes, many electrodes that take EEG measurements. I'll say more about it later, but these musicians went through several years actually of practice and classes of classical improvisation, integrating it in their performances. And before I share with you what was going on and the research that followed, which is now in its 14th year, actually, the idea was to share with you a little bit, really, a few examples of how we work. Before we start, I will just say that with my students in London, the honeymoon lasts 1 year. So it's actually, I think I'm allowed to say it's quite a happy marriage. If the honeymoon is 1 year, then, you know, but it's really from the second year that we take off, so to speak. These wonderful 4 musicians had with me 2 mornings, very far from 1 year. And I think that I will invite them and will share with you a few elements of this approach. But before that, so before we really move to music, for many all over the world, improvisation and classical music performance are either or, right? You either improvise or a serious classical musician. And it has been the case that classical improvisation was non-existing in classical music performance for more than a century, actually. But up until the end of the 19th century, when improvisation begins to decline, and early 20th century, you still have some great virtuoso practitioners, Karl Reinecke and others. I mention him because there are some pianola rolls where you can still hear Reinecke improvising cadenzas in Mozart concerti, nothing to do with Mozartian language, but very flamboyant, you know, improvised cadenzas. But then it went into a deep coma that ended very recently, just a few decades ago, that we are beginning to revive this tradition. But it's worth remembering that from Renaissance and then into the Baroque and classical and Romantic until late Romantic era, improvisation was a part of what you would expect as audience to experience in a concert. And I want to mention here a wonderful book by Dana Gooley. Dana is a man, usually it's a woman's name, but that's a male scholar, a musician, and he searched for many years, hundreds of clips from press and letters and exchanges, and paints a very clear picture about the social aspect of concerts and the fact that it did include an element of risk-taking, that the same piece was never performed twice alike. We know that Chopin didn't allow his students to work on the same piece twice alike. And for example, I think it's worth mentioning the second Nocturne Opus 9 of Chopin, the E-flat major, this one. Etc. Back to the microphone, exists in 17 versions. All of them are made of Chopin himself improvising entire passages differently each time. And we are lucky because his students, who are top, of course, concert pianists, wrote quickly the alternative passages at the end of the lesson. So we have it. And I want to mention the edition of John Rink online, the new critical Chopin edition of Peters online, where you have them juxtaposed one above the other, and you can make your own version. The first exposition version 3 and second exposition version 11, and that's what they did. Robert Levin is another name I will mention him, one of the great champions of classical improvisation today, And his lectures on improvising Mozart, the improvising Mozart, and how improvising and composing are actually very near, are on YouTube. And his violin concerti edition with Bahnreiter give you violinists elements in Mozartian language, several elements in a modular way for you to cook your own cadenza and take off from it. So just, I hope these are appetizers. But, and we know, of course, Bach was much more, better known among, let's call it, general public as an improviser than he was as a composer. And people traveled from very far away to Leipzig to hear him on Sunday in Thomaskirche improvising. Beethoven, the improviser, we know his recitals were made of elements, movements from different compositions in the first half, but the second half, when he improvised, was the full house, not the first half. Mendelssohn was a god of improvisation, so was Schumann, Clara, and Robert, both. A bit like high quality jazz concert today, the spirit of, audiences waiting for something edgy was there. There's another element, and you will see that in the presentation, of a very give and take between audience and performance. And I'll stop here, here because I look at the watch and I know that Blanca is looking at me telepathizing, but look at the watch. So let's go. Electricity. Let's tune first. Yeah, that's it. Mute out. Although you see music stands and there is music there, we will not start with anything to do with music. So if you can just a little bit take the music stands away. Yeah, so that it's opened. We will start with playfulness, with elements of really playing games, and the playfulness is an important element because one of the basic elements of the method, and we are going to show we do very few elements, we are talking about is to fuse intuitive ability, musical intuition if you wish, and know-how. But to begin with, apropos the philosophy or actually psychology of the beginning driving force is the playfulness. So what I always asked, and it took me about an hour until you began to believe me that I am not asking you to play the right notes or the, correct, I don't know what, will be, we call it ping pong games. I will play ping pong with you guys. I will throw, instead of a ball, unfinished phrase, question, and I will receive some kind of an answer. And when I say that there isn't the right and wrong, I mean it. If I ask, so how are you today? And you answer me, so-so, or great, or it's none of your business. Every one of these answers is a good one. And that's what I mean. Other elements are important. So let's start, shall we? Yeah, key.
A minor.
A minor. Okay, A minor. Let's go. I'm not saying bravo as a token of politeness. There was a lot of looking for troubles here because I didn't know what I would start with, let alone you didn't know. And the fact that we finished together is not at all evident because I didn't email her yesterday any plan, and we finished together. I also want to draw your attention to the fact, and I'm sure you felt it, that she answered me with exactly the same length, although I didn't give her any time to analyze, calculate, you know, but yet it was the same length and actually also completing arc shape. Okay, and we talked about it a little bit, that's one of the elements of classical style. Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, early and mid, late Beethoven is a different animal. When it comes to the phrase structure, that is something that instinctively, and believe me, that's how it started. They were less comfortable than I hope you are now, but this is something that when you do with musicians, whether they are well-educated already or very young but talented, is there more often than not spontaneously available. Apropos the unconscious knowledge, which I'm sure that psychologists here study seriously, and I know that you and others are working on the phenomenon of musical talents, and that is a part of it. But let's do a bit more. Can I invite you for looking for troubles? Key. D minor. D minor. You're very minorish today. Okay. D minor. Sorry. G minor. G minor. Okay. All well? Yeah. Okay. Because you know you're not the first. She was the first. So you see, she's still alive. Let's take it a bit further. Okay. Let's go. Bravo, because we agreed about G minor and I wasn't very honest. I didn't stay in G minor. So I modulated, I didn't know myself where to, and even less you did. And there was a moment or two actually when you, like the electricity stoppage before, your screens got blank, right? But you continued. And the fact that Nicola continued is a lot. Because, and it will link with what I will share with you in the presentation in a minute, with flow, with the ability to hear ahead. And that's really what we are looking for here, a listening, not to what am I doing now, or even less so, what have I just done, kind of post-mortem judgmental analysis, but what's coming to come. Apropos state of flow that moves forward. And you, in all these modulations, I don't know if you know about it, but you found me. Yes. Yes, but despite what's happening, your violin and I had great time. Okay, and that's the you know, connection of intuition, musical spontaneity, creative spontaneity, and know how, first of all, instrumental. He was uncomfortable, but kept playing, and the violin playing was there. And we found each other harmonically as well. Okay. I see that the clock enjoys the fact that we are having less time, so I will push a bit further. Can I invite the two of you without me to play ping pong? Okay, so just arrange yourself up. Voila. And what your job is to have a good time, to look for troubles and to have a good time. And by that I mean, keep the symmetrical phrase structure as your structural guide of where you aim for. And when there are wrong notes, and there will be, I hope there will be, deal with them going forward, not backwards, which is what appoggiatura is about, you know? If you... If I would clean that, I guess we agree that this is much less interesting, although politically correct as far as the law of counterpoint. Huh? So let's have a good time. What key? Okay. Yeah. Now I'm your audience. Let's go. Sorry? Who starts first? Have a little fight and decide. Develop. Very good. Very good. That's an example of a double negotiation. I think you wanted to finish 2 bars earlier. And you... Exactly. And you said, forget it. I have too much of a good time. We go on. So there was another, actually, little coda. And that's the creative side of it. As long as it remains in the language, as long as the meter is there alive, so the rhythm becomes the much more important element. And the listening to what comes next, goal point, and you will in a minute see how we apply it in repertoire, is still alive, okay? And the fact that you have this little oops is great, because that's how, you know, life on stage is. We all know, no matter how experienced we are, that we all have some moments which are not exactly as written in the book. And the question is, what do we do with it? I push a bit more forward than I planned, just as a taster to feel at home out of tonality. We will do now a little, so go back to a quartet position, please, so that you see everyone. Yes, exactly. We will keep the same structure, but tonally go tonally free. I'm deliberately not saying atonal, it will not be dodecaphonic a la Schoenberg. We won't have a series of 12 notes that we keep, etc. But it will be tonally free. And let's start perhaps with 1, 2, 3. I will throw a question phrase. The 3 of you answer me. Okay. Then I will play something else, I don't know what, and the 3 of you answer me. So solo, trio 1, solo, trio 2, and then we will continue as a quintet. Okay. And that's really looking for troubles, because feeling when to finish becomes much less evident. There isn't a cadential build up towards a cadence, which means it's a challenge for the listener. The structure listening of going forward and speaking the neoclassical. We are basically in neoclassical style. Shall we go? So no key now. God, I didn't plan it, but I actually took the hardest option of ending with a fermata. To bring an ensemble to finish together, improvised ensemble on a fermata, then it worked. And you added the kind of last, hello. That is done a lot with themes taken from the audience. And if you go to this wonderful book of Dana Gould, Fantasies on Improvisation, you will find it there. It's important, I think, to mention also that at the time before a major piece, a performer would improvise a prelude. And between elements, if time will allow, I will show you an example, between movements or between short pieces, you would improvise a modulating interlude to pave the way from the key of the previous piece that you finished to the next one, taking, going away from the mood of the finale of the last piece and building towards the next one. And that was, again, just like now, looking for trouble. Before we move on, and as introduction to what we will start with, which is applying it to work on repertoire, solo and chamber music, we'll start with Bach. Can I invite you to a little different style walk, which will be a kind of introduction, elementary introduction towards Baroque style. Okay, key.
G minor.
G minor. That's fine. A minor. Okay, you have strong influence. Excuse me, it's I'm beginning to get hot, so. A minor, right? That's what? No, G minor. A minor, let's go. Yeah, okay. moments where, oh my God, where am I? But you didn't stop. Yeah, me neither. You know, that makes life much more interesting. And when you improvise the prelude, and that was a baby prelude, the length is not always guaranteed to be short. By the way, the first modulation, who was leading it, you or I?
Late.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you say wrong note, because the idea is to turn almost every wrong note from an enemy to a friend. And actually, you led it, because I went from what you asked, which is C major, I went to G major. Okay, and you said, I want C major, and we went there. Okay, and you said it by rejecting the F sharp, which is a leading note to G. But you know,
yes.
Me neither. I don't analyze it when I am on stage improvising. It's an awareness. Well, I've been doing it for a day or two more than you, so it's more easily coming. But the answer to these processes is the movement forward. Okay? But let's move on. Let's move on to how we apply it on repertoire. And we'll take two examples. One, Bach unaccompanied D minor partita, the partita with the chaconne, just the first part of the first movement, allemande. And here we apply another principle, which is to get the harmonic reduction underneath the work we are working on. And Bach unaccompanied, both cello suites and violin partitas and sonatas are Telemann fantasies and flute partita by Bach and Carl Philipp, etc. This is a golden, background or material to do it on. And we obviously don't have time to go into details. I will just mention or invite you to follow us when you listen to it, that the harmonic rhythm is one of the main drivers. It's not only what's the harmony and what does it mean, but when does it move and where is the goal point? So let's perhaps, who would like to play full text? You do? So maybe, Sasha, you play, and I will make some noises. Okay? No, with me. Now, you play and I will make some noises, and you will tell me what kind of noise am I doing. The real boss here. So, you know, what was I doing? Yes, the chaconne, and one of the magics is that every movement leading to chaconne is generated from the chaconne. But not only, the second suite. The idea is that two violin players can support each other doing that. It's easy for me on the piano, the harmony, let the hand fall down and you have a chord for free. But to look for it from a bass line that isn't written, but you take with you on stage in your inner ear is the next exercise I want to share with you. Again, the kind of work that the trio performing the concerts in Guildhall College, on which the research I share with you is based on. That's the work they have done, full menu. So let's go. Can I? Ah, you've put the mute already. Okay. So Nicola will lead, although he will play very few notes. He will move when the harmony moves. That's it. But the direction he gives Stasha leads her phrasing-wise. That's the idea. It's a lot to ask after only 2 mornings. With my Guildhall students, I'm usually getting to that point after a month or even a bit more. So bravo for jumping to the cold water. Let's go. We won't go throughout, just to give you the taste of the beginning. Let's go. So that's a compliment to him, but how did it help you, not him?
I felt like forced.
Okay. Although you played quite freer than,
Yes,
you started
yeah.
yesterday or 2 days ago. You were still a bit too gentlemanish for, this. I would like eventually to be even with more, authority is not the right word, with more clarity of your role points, because you took some from her. Okay? Again, it's an exercise of listening, and obviously they will swap roles, so that when one works on this repertoire, every one of the 2 partners does both parts, obviously. But I think we will have to move on. Just to say before we move to the quartet, this is just the aperitif. It's not even the starter. It's just the aperitif, because this deep layer of reduction will be then open in more than one way, according to the musician's search of interpretation. So it can be more gravitas, playing more backwards, or the direction you took. And that's to do with what harmonic progression or what harmonic goal you want to lean on. Let's take the Beethoven quartet. So okay. Similar work we do on chamber music, and in a way that's an even stronger impact because of the challenge of listening involved. Again, this electricity stoppage was not planned, so I will run a bit forward. Let's just start, and pardon me, I will stop you very soon. Okay, just to put us in context, it's Opus 18, number 4 in C minor quartet, one of the early Beethoven quartets. Let's go. I will ask you to do it again, and I will harmonize it or follow it with you through the harmonic reduction, just as a reminder of what. And then the quartet will do it without me inside. Let's go. To it, we will share with you now the beginning of it, which is asking Stasha to remain with the full text of hers, of primo, violin primo, but the rest of the quartet will reduce, will play the harmonic movement, not chords. And the danger, apropos applying it, the danger is to approach harmonic awareness by salami slices. This is this chord, wonderful. Where's next? Another chord. Boom. No, it's the movement and the tension release that they create. So in a way, the cello runs the show, although it has just one long C at the beginning. The character, the storytelling of this, which means opposite interpretation. Which contradicts, of course, Beethoven's Forzato, but the directions within this harmonic progression is what we are looking for. That's where the storytelling or the narrative is developed. Let's go. I'm saying bravo not because I want to send flowers. I'm saying bravo because it wasn't only right. There was a story here. And I think that is taking the, daring how far you go as storytellers further than where you maybe when we met the first time you were a bit shy, I was a guest, I don't know, but there is more of how you really, I think, want to play. There is much more to it, but the clock starts to put angry faces on me. I will just mention that when that work goes further, every single one of the quartet members, first violinist is the last, leads by playing reduction while the other play full text, and by playing full text while the other play reductions. And that's how we get the bigger picture or the longer term elements becoming something one feels in the guts. I think we will, for the moment, stop it here. There is another concert in the evening, and maybe we'll take it, you know, somewhere else. We surely will, not maybe, promise. If there are any questions before the quartet is, you know, joining you, please, I guess we can have 3 or 4 minutes of questions to them, not only to me. Not all of you at the same time, please.
How did you feel while playing so freely? Did you feel free? Yes.
When we improvise.
Yes. Yes.
Strange, but it was fun. I don't know, but it was, yes, it was fun.
You know, it's interesting. You asked, did you feel free? Stasha said yes, and he said it was fun. And that's the test. I forgot to say, well, they know the first question, even when we prepare, you know, Queen Elizabeth Hall concert with a string quartet, Beethoven late quartet, when we work on it, the first question I have is, did you enjoy it? And if the answer is no, why? But really why? Not, you know, where they're talking. The fact that it was free, as Stasha said, she was free answering the question, is the result of the fact that there was enjoyment, that there is again a connection with playfulness, which is why the ping pongs come, you know, in. Okay, yes.
When you were playing the Nicola, when you told him that you had a black note, why do you think they occurred when the
Sorry, can you say it again louder and slower? Or there is actually a microphone.
We're playing with Nicola.
Something doesn't work with the mic. Maybe switch the on button.
You hear me now?
No.
I can yell.
Even better, do it.
Okay,
Okay, Gail.
playing with Nicola, you kind of did into the cat black. Why do you think they occurred while
Okay, first of all, he did not have blackout. Blackout means that he would stop. He didn't. And that's very important. He had a moment of, oh, what's going on? And he is not used to do that. So that's looking for trouble without experience. But what happened is that I went one way. I did a modulation, the M word. At first, when you do that, I don't know if you teach, I hope you do. And if you will want to do it with pupils, you don't modulate at the beginning. So you stay in the key you start with. That's the more friendly and warm water. Then I went to a modulation and he guessed or hoped that I would take another modulation. So we had a clash. Oh, sorry? Oh, he even hoped so. And he perhaps trying to telepathize with me, but I didn't. I was a bad boy. And that's when the real challenge begins. What do you do with the clash? So it creates a wrong note, of course. And then you have two options. Either you stop and you say, oh, I'm so sorry. Go home and take your money in the cashier on the way out. Or you continue. I must tell you the story of my first concerto, which is going along your question exactly. Just finished the academy and a friend, young conductor, invited me to play Mozart 4/8, this gorgeous A major. If I told you, except that that's not what I did. I did this. You laugh, and I would laugh as well. It wasn't funny, believe me. Everything was funny. And the next thing I knew, and I didn't have a clue about what we are talking about now and what I'm sharing with you, is that I heard myself doing this. I have no idea why and how, and maybe there was an angel who was very bored and just happened to either move my finger, I don't know. And the rest of the concerto somehow, I survived it, and I plan to quickly change and run away before people will take me to the police. And the plan did not work quick enough, and people came to me, and I thought they will wish me good luck in my new next profession. But instead they asked me, what edition are you using? And then the penny dropped, I think. And we know now you never do that in the first appearance of the theme, never. You should not do that. What I did was surviving. But when a theme repeats, we know that Mozart and Haydn and Beethoven and all these giants who were also performers did do that. You don't repeat the exposition copy-paste, never. So that's either blackout or something that comes out of it creatively. And the second choice is much more fun. To both you and your audience. It's a win-win or lose-lose. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I hope my computer is, yeah, okay. So what I'm going to share with you, as I said, is based on a live concert given by a trio, singer, a flautist, and a pianist. There were several pieces. I will share with you a few samples from the Shepherd on the Rock, which is for clarinet, but we wanted it to be because of the shepherd with the flute, or she wanted it to be with the flute, and these are all wonderful performers. I'm having a good time there, as you can see, turning pages. I'm not working very hard. These swimming caps, as Blanca calls them, are not the latest generation. They were a bit heavy and not comfortable. And to sing with such a thing is not a great joy. So she's a fantastic singer, but she's obviously not in good conditions. As I said, it was in the cognitive laboratory of Imperial College. Importantly, members of the audience were connected to EEG equipment with electrodes and the performers. Some of the audience members, that's the 2018 version. You can find the article itself in Frontiers of Psychology from 2018. Some members of the audience were blindfolded. And the reason is that in 2013, when we did the first version of the experiment, we didn't do that. And the question that jumped up is the audience influenced by the movement of the players when they are in improvisation state of mind? Now, the experiment was such that the trio was asked to play parts of pieces, not entire pieces, twice. Once, what they were asked to do is to play it as if they have reached the final of a serious competition, and they play the final stage to win. And there is no room for risks, no room for nonsense like improvisation, inverted commas, to play it safe, but their best, expressively, and to win the competition. And to play as beautifully as they can, but without any notion of improvisation. And the second time, which was of course mixed in arbitrary order, the second time, after they won and they play for friends the first prize concert, and they are free and they play with, in improvisation state of mind, applying elements of what you've seen, which remember are about 5% of what we do. A part of the course in London includes musicians who come together with actors. So imagine a chamber music, a sextet made of 3 musicians and 3 actors, or 4 musicians and 2 actors, etc. And the speech intonation of the actors when they express what they do dramatically, we take as musical material with which we connect. And there are many other elements. So that's what they were asked to do. The concert was made of these 2 pieces. The audience didn't know anything about improvisation. They didn't hear this word. The audience knew that they are going to hear a few pieces twice. First time, second time. And they were asked later, and John, the great John Sloboda, to whom I must say in brackets, although I'm the first author of these publications, without John, nothing would come out, really. It wouldn't see the day of light. So that was really a gift to have him on board, as well as Professor Henrik Jensen from Imperial College, who is also the head of the complex data analysis, because this produces mountains of data, which very few mathematicians on Earth are able to deal with. So this concert experiment was actually looking at the phenomenon of improvising as a part of classical concert repertoire work performance with different disciplines involved. Psychological, so John Sloboda created these questionnaires that the audience filled during the concert. After every pair of performances, they heard perform piece 1 first time, second time. There was 3 minutes pause. The audience filled the questionnaires, and same after every other pair. And then John worked on the feedback of the musicians as a psychologist, and we'll come to it. Then we looked at the musical outcome, and I did here a performance study analysis using Sonic Visualizer, which is a very advanced software that was developed by the CHARM project in London, Cambridge University, Oxford, Guildhall, King's College. That was developed at Queen's Mary for this project. I will show you what it does. And then we looked at the objective data through the neuroscience team. And that was actually the first time that looking into so-called classical music performance, all these disciplines came with one story, which I want to show you. But I will start with sharing with you 2 snaps of 20 seconds of such examples. That's the opening of The Shepherd on the Rock. And I will invite you to hear what it sounds like in the, here it says prepared. We called it strict. That's a competition version. No nonsense, please. You play it safe. But in order to win the competition, so the most beautiful possible, here it is just the opening long D. That's it. I'm sorry for cutting it so brutally. Same moment, but this time the what we call let go version. After a small glass of wine. Here it is. I hope you noticed this appoggiatura, which is not written. We know that at the time that was all in a day's work, you would add it when a theme repeats. And she did it spontaneously, it didn't come in rehearsals. But try to remember it, because there are several performance-related elements which are very different. And I will give you another, no, sorry, that's not And this. So later in the piece, the strict version, the competition version, here we go. Same moment, the let go version. Those of you who played, you surely heard the elaborations inside, which is not the only difference. It's actually not even the most important. When I'm talking about improvisational state of mind, I'm not talking only about notes. You can improvise in a state of being as performers without changing a single note. And I want to share with you now the results of the research. This is John Sloboda's outcome of the questionnaires he devised. And I remind you, the audience didn't have a clue about what we are looking for. They just knew one performance, and they were asked which of the two is more improvisatory in character, innovative, emotionally convincing, musically convincing, and where did you find more risk-taking? You can see the result, the gap, the difference between what we know and the audience did not know. The let go version, improvised state of mind, is many times above anything that accidentally could happen. It is, not anywhere near. And that is, of course, a data which is subjective. And just a minute, it was important for me to have two layers of data and research, one which is based on the musicians and the performers' feedback, so subjective data, and one which is objective. And you will in a minute see what I mean. Yes?
Were the audience, between the audience conditions?
Very good question, thank you. And I am naughty to have forgotten to say that. In the first experiment in 2013, we were not very strict about differentiating. In this one, and John was, strict like a military commander, we had a full distribution of 0 interest in classical music to musicians. And we also had people coming from cultures, non-Western cultures, for whom classical Western art music was a very bizarre thing, So it was the whole range. And which is why I thank you for your question. The results did not depend on background of knowledge, which was that together with the fact that people with blindfolded results were similar to those who could see, begins to suggest that we are talking about universal elements of responding to musical stimuli and emotional musical stimuli. Now, let's look at the performance studies observations. Tempo and flow, not the psychological sense of Csikszentmihalyi, but flow, the musical flow. The improvised state of mind performances were objectively, by that I mean metronome-wise, slower. not hugely, but 88 to 92 metronome, you know, on crochet, you hear the difference. That was clear. But the feedback of the musicians, the feedback of the audience was that they felt the opposite. They felt that the let go version was more flying. They often, especially the non-musicians, reported it's faster, although it was slower. Apropos what, you know, the gift that the gods gave us musicians to touch time, subjective time. You can make time stand still for 2,000 people when, you know, the magic happens. And that was clearly the property of the improvised state of mind performances. And of course, pretty well connected to that is the business of beat and pulse. The strict version, competition winning, was much more accurate than the improvised state of mind when it comes to the evenness of the short-term beats. But in the improvised state of mind, the three performances were much more together by the end of phrase and depart into a new phrase, although there was much more risk-taking taken and notes which were not there and they were not ready for, which, if you wish, doesn't make sense, but it happened. So that's a part of the magic, and that was throughout. It wasn't just one or two, it was throughout the performances. Business of hypermeasure. Hypermeasure is not my term. I wish I was so wise, but I'm not. It's Arthur Schnabel, who came with the concept of, as a performer, when you put 2 or 4 or 3 or whatever bars as one gesture, they function as hypermeasure. So if instead of like the neighbor's child is playing, that becomes 1, and 2, and do you see what I mean? Am I? Pulses of whole bar beats and hypermeasures, 2 bars, are clear and accurate in the improvised state of mind, and they hardly exist. They're actually non-existing in the strict version. The strict version is very accurate, which is where the Baroque gesture and the stile parlando and stile negale, you know, come into action. And the spirit of it. The larger beat is actually a structural beat. So if you think of a simple example, of one roof, or in romantic music, which is where it's getting much more complex. Let's take Schubert's last sonata, the B flat, Deutsch 960. Rather than, I exaggerate, of course, no one plays like that, but do you see what I'm trying to say? And the next one is, of course, to do with risk-taking. The musicians performing the strict, when they perform the strict version, went literally with what's on the text, which is never a complete picture. You cannot, even in contemporary music, when some try to put every possible thing, every possible detail of performance on the score, it's not really possible. But it makes it easier to anticipate what comes next, because, you know, 3 professional musicians play, the score is there, they know what's written next, and that what's written is what they are aiming for, so there is less surprise possible or less risky. In the improvised state of mind, they spontaneously deviate from the text, but within the language, within harmonic structure. It is not about, oh, let's do whatever we like. No, absolutely not. As you heard in Beethoven Opus number 4, the mastery of the harmonic structure is the departure point. Without that, we can't do anything. But inside that, there was room for spontaneously deviating with the appoggiatura, with rubati that were not rehearsed, and then it's telepathy begins. So the musician, the flautist is enlarging the upbeat. The singer will have, and she did, respond to that spontaneously. And audiences apparently, as you saw, feel it straight away. But the magic is that it was the improvised state of mind, as I said before, that was more structurally coherent. They were actually more together in the more dangerous version. The being less together in the street was minute. I had to really go with the software sometimes to look at that, but it was clear. And in the let go, in the riskier one, it was absolutely together, because they aim for the same goal point in advance together. It's like this, like great dancers that come from two different angles and meet after a long, complex movement, really together, at the same point in time. And what follows is the improvised gestures. So you heard here, I think, those of you who played it, obviously, you heard notes which are not written, but they are embellished or elaborations which were a part of the performance practice. And when one musician does it, the other will respond to it, later in the phrase. And that's where the risk-taking, manifests itself in creative gestures, in both of timing and actual notes. And this is not yet improvising independently of repertoire. It's within repertoire. Just briefly to share with you one way of measuring objectively the performances, because we also have the feedback of the musicians straight after the concert and 2 weeks later, when the adrenaline was, down. The upper graph, the one above is the tempo, is the curve of tempo. The lower graph is the curve of intensity. And you can see in both examples, the above is the strict and below is the let go. And you can see more regularity, zigzag if you wish, in the strict version, right? You can see also a kind of homogeneous relation between curve of tempo and curve of intensity, and it is less so in the improvised one. The interesting story comes, when I go into details, but the clock and bunker will kill me if I do that, so I move on. And here, state of flow, this time the psychological state of flow, Csikszentmihalyi, as he defines it. And, I think that this text speaks for itself. The musicians gave a report of how they felt. One of your questions touched on, don't remember who asked whether they felt free, and then Nicola said, and fun. They also reported clearly that they enjoyed the improvised state of mind, although it was more dangerous, much more. But also that they were surprised. They had no idea that they did what they did. And that's quite something, because they did quite a lot. They took risks that worked, and it was a real spur of the moment, which is one of the characteristics of flow. The effortlessness as well, and the reduction of anxiety, stage fright, which we all know. No matter how experienced we are, until anxiety turns to enjoyment, there is a long journey. And that state of mind always did that. Now, when it comes to the objective data, that's where the neuroscience team came in, and the clock is now staying up to make it impossible for me to go here in details. But you know, this article exists in MPR, Music Performance Research, 2013. Google my name or Sloboda's name.
We can share it, everyone.
Yeah. And you will see that I will mention two things. One is that the areas that were more active in the brain during the strict, let's win this competition state of mind, were those responsible for sustained control of details. And those in the more improvised state of mind are centers which are associated with more room for intuition, with imagination taking over, but in conjunction with reality, with play. You know? The most important finding or contribution, I think, of the neuroscience team then was that unlike the strict version, when there was a very attentive listening to the audience, in the strict version, there was the audience had their mode of functioning of the brain, and the musicians had theirs. In the improvised state of mind, there was a lot of similarity between the brain functioning of the musicians and the audience. There was a change in how the brain started functioning. And that's quite something. There was a synchronization, if you wish, at a neurological level. And sure enough, the audience reported, as you saw, a much stronger experience and connection with the music and the musicians. This looks, you know, like, what's the big deal? But it's a huge deal. LAMPL-Z is a tool that neuroscientists measure, with which they measure the complexity of the brain's activity. And I'm not a neuroscientist, so they had to explain it to me like baby, and they spent many hours doing that. So I hope I will be faithfully. The brain, if it can, it's a lazy thing, and it will use not more than it must use. And the difference between what you see as a lower level of complexity of the brain in the strict competition-winning mode versus the improvised state of mind is huge. Is the same as the difference between sleep and awake. It's huge. And it's also the same as being awake, relaxed, and being under LSD. So, Henrik Jensen, when he lectures about our work, he says, if you want to feel something similar to LSD without destroying your brain, improvise. And that's another thought that is quite groundbreaking and needs more research. But the neuroscience team came with a model. The primary state of consciousness relates to the entropic brain hypothesis, what they call the primary state of cognition or consciousness, where the level of disorganization is high, is a mess. But that's often where creativity begins, from mess. In a more focused or more channeled towards doing area of that is the state of flow that Csikszentmihalyi is talking about. And within it, because it's a much more complex business, the improvisation state of mind, of musicians improvising. Barenboim, if you heard his 10 lecture many years ago, said, and it's Barenboim, I mean, he is the genius he is. He can play by heart 3 Beethoven sonatas recital in lunchtime and conduct a Wagner opera by heart in the evening, same day. He does. And he said that improvising is the highest level of creation a musician can come up with, and Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach says the same. And he had only one teacher, which was his papa. So, you know, one can trust him. There is a lot more, but time there isn't much more. So I will stop here. And before Blanca really kills me, if there are any questions, please. Yes.
I was wondering whether you use any formal flow measures.
Any what measure? Flow measure.
Psychological measures with the performance after.
Yes. Yes. The questionnaires that the performers were given were driven by elements of flow. So, you know, whether they were enjoying or not, aware of what they were doing, hence the result of surprise, whether
So
they
it
were...
wasn't just a clear description of the experience, but it was just based on the...
No, so that was the subjective element, but what I showed you about the brain activity, the neuroscientists, is the objective. They cannot manipulate how the brain works. So we had this, and for the first time, we had these two sides of the coin, the subjective generated data and the objective one. And as you saw, the neuroscientists believe it's actually the first time that neuroscience acknowledges, scientifically speaking, that an improvisational state of mind exists. Because before that, if you spoke with scientists, oh, this is one of the nonsense that artists, once they have the third glass of wine, begin to tell you about, but you know, this is not serious. And now neuroscience does acknowledge that, or begins to take it seriously and go further into it. Yes.
Maybe improvisation, so state of mind is like life without rules.
Life without
rules. It's like our nature.
That's a very good one.
Now we live with what we must do in our life, and when we measure, we use this point. It's like a life without rules.
My answer would be yes, but. And not because I'm trying to be a politician, I'm not. Yes, because you don't follow the rules strictly. But, just a minute, remotely in a Schenkerian way, there are layers of rules. So those that govern the immediate details on the surface, as you saw, that there is a huge flexibility with it. But the structure, the deep structure, there is no monkey business with it in these performances. It was absolutely following, if you wish, the rules or the harmonic progressions. So this is not, you know what? You don't have to practice, just do whatever comes. No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And sure enough, you know, those who object improvisation, that's what they say. It's an invitation for what you call in French n'importe quoi. You know, anything goes. No, absolutely not. And the practice of improvisation, that's why the honeymoon takes 1 year, you know, it's a long honeymoon, is to take in the spirit of the rules, if you wish, and follow the essence of it. And I'm using some elements of partimento, for example, but executing them differently each time. So the very detailed one step after the other, yes, then I agree with you. That's the yes. And deeper is the but. Yes.
I found the position of why improvising part 1 and the strict part 2 in Bach family fantasy and
of course.
Yes, what do you think about this?
You don't improvise in a fugue, full stop. You don't mess with strict counterpoint. The Baroque has two types of counterpoint, strict and free. So when you have what we call free Baroque counterpoint, there you can, when you repeat, all the dance forms in the partita and the suites are every half repeats, right? They would, in our French and English suites and partitas, they never played the second time when you repeat exactly as the first. Even, think of Goldberg Variations aria, which is already embellished by Bach. But when you repeat, you wouldn't repeat the same embellishments, because it's for you to retell the story. Like in real life, if you have to say to someone something for the second time, there is a reason. They said they didn't take you seriously enough or whatever. You don't say it the same way. Okay, so I agree with you. You don't. There are areas of the language of the composition in the language, which are strict, and they should remain strict. But how you play them, and that's why you can improvise without changing a single note, depending on the theme. In a toccata, the story is very short, that's it. But in a slow theme, you can phrase it differently. And, if it's a fugue that allows it, maybe the contra subject with different flow than the theme. And that's an improvisational state of mind without changing a single note. I never change notes in a fugue.
Yes, existing 10 variants of Hamlet fantasy of Bach, and only one fugue. One variant.
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand.
Well, I think that goes too deep. Now we are, because I'm a killer one question more, then we shall say goodbye for this short question.
Do we know whether the ability of measuring yet another factor, a very simple factor by the name of playing it for the second time? As we know that all students and ourselves feel much more free and relaxed, and even we have a bigger concentration or whatever. So has it been taken into consideration?
Very, very precious question. And I'm sure that you know that some cynical jury members of a panel, when they see a very nervous candidate, they say, why won't you start from the second time, right? Which is very nasty. I don't know that such experiment was done, but I dare guessing that you will find in the second time elements of improvisation state of mind, which is, and I'm talking specifically about the short-term pulse being not only less strict, but not the one you refer to, but going to a deeper pulse. We worked with wonderful session that you could hear on we started on the G minor sonata for unaccompanied violin, which Bach writes in semi-demi and 30 seconds and 64. And if you measure it mathematically, it becomes like a robot that got a heart attack. And the idea there is to give directions of tempi. That's Schnabel, not me. Directions of tempo. That's different each time. So at the arrival point, the G, F sharp is where you go. How? It's different each time. And it's when we are very nervous that we try to control every single note, which is a recipe for trumpets.
Shall we make the closer now for this time? Well, thank you very much, and let's greet David. And second thing is that now why I'm also in a hurry, because we, as you know, we have the second part, and you're all heartily invited. At 8 o'clock, it's concert. and combined with public lectures. So there will be also a talk, and students will be there performing something else. And you're invited to connect in a ljubit se u 20 časova na koncertu. And then perhaps there is more chance to talk or ask questions during this following next days because David stays.
Say last word. I don't know if the musicians are here in the room. Then you tell them. I owe them a huge both bravo and thank you for allowing me to push them so far, so fast, and you for encouraging them to come. It's not evident, really. They jumped from the cliff, not knowing whether they arrive to the bottom alive or not, and they were wonderful.
Good point. I forgot to take the thank them also because that part was very exciting. See you later then. Bye.